All right, we're here. We're live. Hey, welcome, gentlemen.
Hey,
Super
Eric.
excited to see y'all. Yeah. Look, I'm Eric Johnson. Welcome to Serverless Office Hours. We do this every Tuesday, same time, same place. We're coming to you on Facebook. We're coming to you on LinkedIn, AW or the AWS Events channel on YouTube, as well as there's one more. It's Twitch. It's our very own Twitch. So we're coming in on all of those. We're super happy to have you here. What we'd love to have you do is while you're watching this, throw in the channel or throw in the chat where you're watching from. We'd love to know where folks are coming from. And so we're going to get started here. Super excited about my guests. I'm going to start with you, Michael. Tell them who you are, what you do, why you're important here. I'll tell them why
Thank
you're
you.
important.
Yeah, thank you. And where I'm from. I'm from Germany.
And where you're from. Yeah.
Yeah. So, hey everyone. I'm super happy to be back on the show. For those who haven't seen me or my face on the show yet, I'm Michael. I'm a product manager in AWS, and I'm in part of the application integrations team at AWS, which covers EventBridge and step functions.
Nice. All righty. And Ashish, where are you coming from? Tell us
So,
who you do, what you do.
yeah, thanks, Eric. So this is the first time I'm on your show. So very happy to be here.
Yeah.
I am based out of the San Francisco Bay Area. I am a product manager in the Amazon VPC team. So a little bit removed from serverless, but we'll figure out why I'm here in a short while, I'm sure. And yeah, I work on two services. I'm a senior product manager. I work on two services, AWS Private Link and Amazon VPC Lattice. And I'm hoping to talk about an exciting feature that we launched at reInvent last year.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that a little bit removed from serverless. That's funny because so I'm a serverless guy, right? So I've been doing serverless since the day we introduced serverless. And on that day, I threw away all knowledge of any networking because I would no longer need it because I am a serverless guy, right? So now when we were building this demo and stuff, we're going to show a little bit. I was doing networking. I was like, oh, it's so much easier now. I mean, y'all have done a lot of stuff because I can't even tell you what a cider is other than apple juice, right? So I mean, it's really exciting to see this, but networking part of our life, and I love it that your team, Michael's team, have worked to make it easier for us serverless nerds who don't work with that. So. Mike, we've showed a little bit, so we're going to get into what we're going to talk about today. We showed a little bit of this a couple of weeks ago, but just really high level. So today we're going to dig in, but I mean, you all have been working this for like the last year and a half. You've been going at it, so I'm going to let you introduce the feature and why you think it's cool.
Starting with me, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Michael. Yeah, Michael Gash. Yes.
Michael Gash at AWS.
Yes, that's right.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, and it's also great to have Ashish on the call here because, yeah, there's different perspectives on why we build this capability and the way we build this capability. And I think it's also great for our audience today to understand some of the network specifics that we had to figure out, the user experience, the decisions that we had to make. So I'm really glad that we have Ashish on the call today. So from a step functions and EventBridge perspective, and for those who don't know these two services, just briefly, EventBridge is a serverless event broker that lets you build event-driven architectures. It basically allows you to decouple your applications and your architectures using events and asynchronous communication. That's EventBridge. Step functions is almost like the orthogonal to EventBridge. Because instead of using
big words here, orthogonal. What do you mean by that?
Well, so often we think that you either have to use EventBridge or step function. Like you have to. Right. It's basically a fork in the road, and it's like okay, use one or the other. But I said orthogonal because it kind of lives in the same problem space of how do I connect pieces together, which EventBridge also does, but in a way that is reliable. And step functions is an orchestrator, so it basically does it through orchestration. It's like a conductor. Yes, whereas right. EventBridge is more like, I always say EventBridge is like this jazz group where everyone plays and it is this great ensemble. And then step functions is the orchestrator, like the conductor in the middle.
Often I've never heard that. I love that. That was great. I'm a jazz drummer. Did you know that? Not well enough to get paid for it, but yes, I was a jazz. So I love that. I love that reference. So sorry, please go ahead. I will not interrupt you again until I do.
No, please do. Please do.
Yeah, I will.
I know. And so often, back to orthogonal, often we see EventBridge and step functions actually being used together. And so they complement each other pretty well, even though one is more like the central orchestrator and the other one is more like I would say the loose, you guys figure it out through events and communication.
Right.
So back to our problem. Yep.
Well, as you said, we have to use the terms choreography and orchestration for that when we're talking about the EventBridge choreography between domains, orchestration within domains. So yeah, it's a great great example. Yeah.
Great point. And now back to the problem statement that we had. Often these components, applications that you either want to integrate as part of your workflow in step functions or in your event-driven architecture, they might be, Lambda functions, AWS services like SQS, SNS, and so on, which we have native integrations for. But also they might be existing applications that are either still on premises or that you have moved to the cloud running on EC2, or that you're modernizing in the cloud using container-based technologies like Amazon ECS or Amazon EKS. And those applications typically live in the VPC, which I'm sure Ashish is going to cover and talk a lot about VPCs. So I'm just quickly going to say what a VPC is. It's basically a protected private cloud. That's why it's in the name, the virtual private cloud, that by default is not accessible from outside, like from the public, but also, given AWS strong security guardrails and emphasis on security, it is also not accessible from AWS services like EventBridge and step functions, which makes sense, right? You don't want all the AWS services just to enter your VPCs. And while this is good from a security perspective, it makes it a little bit harder to integrate those existing applications or applications in VPCs into your event-driven architectures where you use EventBridge, or into your workflows using step functions, because those two services invoke or push information inside or to the endpoint, to the target, which means there needs to be some form of a network connectivity, a route that these services can securely communicate through. And before the feature that we launched together with Ashish's group last year at reInvent, that was not directly possible. So you had to use and fall back to custom code, Lambda functions, using SQS in between to pull messages from that. Basically, long story short, you had to write undifferentiated code, which we don't like at AWS.
All right. Okay, so I want to get into, and we've had several people pop in here. So we're going to do some shout outs for a quick moment. And then we're going to get into some of the networking stuff as well. So first of all, Julian Wood, who's usually in my seat hosting, he has hair. That's about the only way you can tell the difference between us, just so you know. So Julian, good to see you. I wish you were here, but of course we miss you. And then I don't know if you remember, there's a guy, David. Oh darn it, how do you Boyne something? Yeah, no, David Boyne is also in. Dang Skippy, he's out there cheering us on. Always been he's a big he's well known in the serverless and specifically the EventBridge area. So he's there as well. We've got some people coming in from Australia as well. Now remember, we're going to have Ashish kind of explain VPC and kind of the networking part in here in a second. We're going to get to a demo, so this isn't going to be just us talking heads. We have a demo coming up here in just a moment, and we're going to kind of show all this, and then we'll talk through it. But hit us with your questions. We have two experts and then myself in the room. So hit us with some questions. VPC, networking, step functions, EventBridge, best, I don't know, German beers. We'll answer questions as best we can. So hit us up and we'll do the best we can. All right. I'm sorry I interrupted you, Mike, there. Sorry about that. I'm going to be real honest. I got distracted for a sec because we had things going on. But let's jump over. Yeah. Let's jump over Ashish real quick. Give us a deeper understanding, and I want to keep it kind of brief because we want to get into the demo, but talk about a VPC for a minute and how you're kind of spanning these.
Yeah. So Michael gave a good introduction of what a VPC is. So very simply put, it's a private network within which you can launch your EC2 instances, you can create databases. It's basically your walled garden inside which you can do whatever you right. Now we had two services in the networking space called AWS Private Link and VPC Lattice. These two are I would describe them as sister services. And because they kind of do very similar things, right? So what does Private Link do? AWS Private Link essentially lets you connect from a client that is sitting in one VPC to a service that is load balanced that is sitting in another VPC. So essentially you have this private pathway between a client in one private VPC and a load balanced service in another private VPC, and Private Link gives you the underlying connectivity.
And,
so that was
and
fine.
in that, they never, of course, I'm going to interrupt, that's just who I
Yeah,
am, but
that's right.
they stay on the AWS backbone, right? We're not
Absolutely.
leaving the network for that. And that's a critical thing to understand as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
It stays on the AWS backbone. The two VPCs in question don't even need an internet gateway, right? The connectivity happens completely privately off the internet. So AWS Private Link was loved by customers. It was doing fine. Then we launched this new service called Amazon VPC Lattice. Now this is like a more advanced service in the sense that what it does is it if you have an architecture where you have multiple microservices spread across multiple VPCs, VPC Lattice essentially lets you stitch all of those microservices together into a service network. So you can enable this service to service connectivity using Amazon VPC Lattice. Now, as we went to customers, what we heard from them was that, hey, I love Private Link. And I love the fact that sitting in one VPC as a client, I can access a load balance service in another VPC. But I also want a similar connectivity pattern for not just services, but also for resources, like my database, like my cluster, like my standalone application that's running on an EC2 instance. So I want the similar Private Link pattern of connectivity, but also for these resources. When we spoke to customers about VPC Lattice, they were like, hey, I love the fact that I can stitch together the service network with microservices across multiple VPCs. But what about my database, right? I also have a database that I want to stitch together in the same service network. So we were like, we have this same request of access to resources via both Private Link as well as in Lattice. Why don't we come up with a functionality and build one piece of tech that will solve both these problems, right? So we had this idea going around at one place, and suddenly we hear Michael's team come to us and like, hey, so we are the EventBridge and we are the step functions team, right? And we want to enable our customers to access private applications in customer VPCs. So we immediately made the connection between what customers were asking us and what EventBridge was asking us. So we were like, hey, let's solve this problem in a manner by which a Private Link customer, a VPC Lattice customer, as well as an internal AWS team like Amazon EventBridge can make use of this functionality. So that is exactly what we launched last year at reInvent. We call this cross VPC resource access through Private Link and Lattice. And essentially what it does is that if you're a client sitting in VPC A, it allows you the ability to access a resource such as a database, a cluster, an EC2 instance, an application, a domain name, or even like a regular private IP address that's in another VPC. So you can access any of these resources as a client from one VPC. You can access any of these resources that is in another VPC in a completely private manner, either using Private Link or using VPC Lattice or using a combination of the two. Which if you're a networking geek, I can if people ask, I can go into.
Yeah,
and
I'm a definite wannabe. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty a nice piece of tech that we created, and Michael's team was one of the first people to latch onto it, and we were able to do like a phenomenal launch at reInvent.
So I want to kind of, and we'll explain this to my job here because I'm the simplest guy in the room. Let me kind of give you a basic scenario of why this is really critical, right? And so The example that, and we have a video out on this, and I'll post a link, and I'll probably show a little bit of this. But normally, let's say I'm running step functions, right? Michael talked about step functions earlier, what they are, and EventBridge. If I wanted to hit a private API, something in a VPC, either on the same account or another account, I would have to call a Lambda function generally. We would have a proxy. And if I were doing it in another account, I'd have to have another API, maybe a public API, proxying the private. I mean, there's some bouncing around that I would have to do. And one of the things now, some people ask me, like, are you anti-Lambda? I'm not. I'm a huge Lambda function fan. I love Lambda functions, but I don't think we should use them for, just routing, right? Because they're built to compute, to do business logic, right? And so the great thing about this is we can now take that Lambda function out. We don't need the proxy anymore, and we're able to connect directly from step functions or EventBridge to this. So if you were kind of wondering, well, what does that mean for me? That's what that means. One, anytime you're removing a hop, you're removing latency. It might be very little, but a hop is latency, right? Two, it's generally cost, right? If you're saving 6 million invocations of a Lambda by just routing things back and forth, you're saving money. You're calling directly. So it's a really good thing. And I thought we'd kind of go ahead and jump into the demo. I want to see,
Eric,
if we've got any. Oh, yeah. So there was a high. Here we go.
I have one interruption token.
Hit me. Yeah.
Because I want to share some, like a little insight also on why we decided to go with the private link and VPC lattice team, because we had different options. And by options, I mean, we could have built some kind of network technology on our own, but there were reasons why we decided to go with private link and lattice. And as you said, like, it was one of our most requested feature across EventBridge and step functions to like, hey, please let me get rid of these intermediary or proxy solutions that I have to write. Again, nothing against Lambda, but let's not use them for data transport or pure routing, as you said. And there's also other reasons, like security is a big one. Like if a customer wants to have a point-to-point connectivity between, say, EventBridge and EventBus and their API, stitching a Lambda function in between means you also have to configure the security group and the network assignments right, which means that the Lambda function can actually do more, or might be able to do more than purely this point-to-point connectivity. And as we go through the technology that Ashish's team built, we'll see that point-to-point becomes really critical here. It's literally a point-to-point connection that we are making. We are not entering the whole VPC or like having a larger blast radius. The other one was customers already used private link with EventBridge and step functions to call our APIs, to send events to EventBridge through their VPCs. So they already knew private link, and they were happy with that approach. So it felt just natural to now bring it to the last mile, like from into their VPCs, the way they also access our resources from their VPCs. And lastly, we believe that with step functions, EventBridge being the first kind of AWS services launching together with private link, we think this technology will become like the next private link, what private link enabled our customers to do with AWS services, just the other way around, where AWS services can now more naturally, easily connect into VPC resources. Okay, sorry for interrupting.
No, not interrupt. I think it's important to understand.
Yeah.
I'll actually throw one other thing on top of that, and something. So we talked about step functions being outside of the VPC, right? Or Lambda functions being outside, or obviously inside. But in reality, those are sitting in their own VPC, right? AWS managed VPC. So we don't want you to think, whoa, step functions isn't in a VPC. It's not protected. It absolutely is. It's in an AWS managed VPC. So what we're doing is we're connecting to VPCs, right? We're not connecting, something hanging in limbo. And so that's an important distinction to understand.
Yes.
All right.
That's actually very important. Thanks for bringing that up, Eric. After all, at the end of the day, it's basically connectivity between two VPCs.
That's right. Okay, so we've got folks from UK, from Brazil, from France. We have David talking about me taking off in a spaceship. I'm not sure how that's helpful, but it's good to have you, Dave. I appreciate that. He's a litany on YouTube of funny stuff. So apparently folks are liking my lights back here. So I'm pretty excited about that. All right. Are y'all ready to do a demo?
Yep.
All right. More cloud is AWS from, I think we've got that from Qualhorst. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and I'm going to show you what we've got. So let me know. I'm going to watch the comments if that's not big enough, but I think that's plenty big. So,
Yep, for me.
okay. All right. So we've got this cluster. So we'll start out with what do I want to share, right? So sitting in a private VPC or in a VPC, that's kind of redundant, and it's a private VPC. It's doubly private. So sitting in a VPC, I have this cluster. It's running on ECS, running on Fargate, and right now it's just a hello world. That's all it's doing. But if you think about this, I mean, we could be running DeepSeek if we were running our own version, but we'd probably run that, in Bedrock, or we could be running some kind of proprietary, fintech or something where we're like, look, we don't want this to have any public access. We don't want a public API for this, and we don't want it to have access to the public internet either. So this is private all the way around. And something that was kind of cool when I was doing the demo, and I think this is worth showing. When I was doing the demo, I was trying to figure out how can I test, because I wasn't, obviously this is going to shock you, but not when I do code, not always does it work the first time. There it is. I'm just admitting it. I was trying to test, is my API even working? But I couldn't get to it because it was in a private. I mean, I could work locally, but I couldn't get to it because it was in the private and stuff. I was like, I'm going to have to bring up a bastion. I'm going to have to, that kind of stuff. Well, here's something cool I learned. I'm going to bring up Cloud Shell here. And we're going to go ahead and let this, okay, there we go. Let this reconnect. And so with Cloud Shell, we can actually, hang on a sec. I should have brought this up before we started talking, but that's okay. Let's do some stuff. Okay, so if I want to curl my endpoint, and the endpoint that I'm using is HTTPS ECS.slip.link. That happens to be my custom domain that I'm using. So if I hit enter here, you notice nothing's happening because this Cloud Shell is not in the VPC. In fact, if we do that and we add a verbatim to it, so you can see it's resolving, but it's not getting to it. Now, this is an important distinction. And Mike, I'm going to have you explain that, why we're using a public zone and stuff like that. If you all want to explain that real quick, and I'm going to show how we test it with a Cloud Shell, and I'm going to bring that up while you're doing that. Is that all right?
Yep, that's fair.
Okay.
Ashish,
all
do you
right.
want to take the private DNS, public DNS feature one? You're on mute.
Uh-oh, he looks frozen.
No?
Nope.
Okay, there he is. All right. Okay. Yep. Can one of y'all explain why we use a public zone and a public domain?
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, so for now, the feature, Eric, you're using an ALB, right? Application Load Balancer?
I am. Yes, I'm using an ALB. That's correct.
Yes. So the ALB that Eric is using, when you create an ALB, it by default gets a public DNS entry anyways. But Eric has created a public Route 53 zone where he registered his, I think you're using Route 53 here as well, right?
I am. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yep. I'm using public zone.
Registered the public DNS name here because currently the requirement that we have in order to connect to private APIs is that the domain that you are targeting needs to be publicly resolvable. This is something we're working on. It's also related to how certificates and certificate chains are being resolved. And for now, we can only resolve public trusted certificate chains. That's why there's also a restriction. And so this is currently I would say a known limitation that the resources that you share, even though they are private, like the private IP address that you have of the ALB, need to carry a public DNS host name.
Yeah, I'll just add some more color to that. So essentially, in this feature called Cross VPC Resource Access that we launched, there is the concept of a resource configuration. And the resource configuration can take three things as a resource, as I was alluding to earlier. It can either be a IP address that is private, or it can be a domain name, or it can be a RDS database, ARN. So the limitation that Michael is referring to is that today in the resource configuration, you can only define a resource configuration with a publicly resolvable domain name. Privately resolvable domain names or domain names that are within a private hosted zone within your VPC are not supported. We are working on that, but today, your domain name has to be public, and it can resolve. It can resolve to a private IP address or a public IP address.
Perfect.
And typically, like what would work is just using the ALB generated DNS name, for example, if you don't want to create a custom one. Like, I mean, for your demo, it's easier. The custom one.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because I'll never be able to type all that out. I couldn't even remember ECS. So while they were talking, hopefully you were watching. What I did is I brought up a bastion. Basically, this is a VPC shell, and you can see just by going to the plus, you say create a VPC environment. So this means that I can actually have a shell, a cloud shell, inside the VPC, which is super helpful. And then what I did is I actually set it up, and I think I can show the actions here. View details. So I use the VPC. This happens to be the VPC that I know that's sitting in. This is the private VPC. The subnet is a private subnet because I'm working that's all private and saved in there. The security group is the same security group that the ALB is using to talk to this. And so by setting that all up, I can now hit my API, and you notice I have to pass in the XAPI key. This is because my actual application that's in the containers, the ECS containers, requires an API key. Now I've obfuscated this key so you can't see what it is. That's very secret. But and then I hit the endpoint, and you can see I get a hello from the back end with a timestamp and environment development, so on and so forth. So if this is a little off topic, but I found this super helpful that now I show everybody here. So super helpful. Did you know you could do private VPC shells, Michael?
I knew because I learned from you.
That's right. There we go. That's all I want to hear. She probably knew this already. So
yeah.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this down. Let's get to building. Let me show here. And we've got some questions coming in. They're asking if we're going to talk about cross-account and cross-region. Yes, we are. Specifically, there's support for services like OpenSearch using cross-region. And so, Ashish, I may tap into you on that one in a little bit. So, okay, so here's our cluster. Like I said, we're listening on 443. Everything's basically set up. And so what we're going to do, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the VPC dashboard, and down into the VPC, they pay me to speak here. It's getting hard. Down into the VPC dashboard under private link and lattice. And Ashish, I want to thank you for explaining the difference of those to me. I didn't understand the difference until you just did.
And Eric, the fact that private link and lattice are now clubbed, under one heading should give you an indication that, because as I was alluding to earlier, these are sister services, they're going to be converging more and more. Access to resources was just the beginning, and we want to converge these services more and more using service networks as the central construct.
Beautiful. That makes sense to me. So the two features we're going to look at are resource configurations and resource gateways, right? So we're going to build a resource gateway first. Now, the way you approach this is your resource gateway it's right in the name. It's the gateway by which you can reach a bunch of resource configurations, right? So it's kind of a one-to-many. So rather than doing a resource gateway for every resource configuration, that doesn't make sense. Ashish was saying earlier, I may have RDS back here. I may have a ECS cluster. I may have a bunch of different things. But because they're in the same VPC, I can just build a resource for each one and have a single gateway for all of them. Ashish, do not fear jumping in and going, that's all wrong, Eric. It's okay to say that. Okay.
He was absolutely spot on, Eric. So a resource gateway is essentially just a path for traffic to enter into the VPC. So if you want to share resources with another account, and you want that account to access resources in your VPC needs to have a resource gateway, right?
Yes.
And as you were saying, you do not need to have a resource gateway per resource. But if you want that architecture, you're very welcome to do so. You can have multiple resource gateways in a VPC, but you need only one.
Right. The only time I think you would do it differently, and this is me kind of guessing out there, is if I need to apply different security groups. One's a little
Absolutely.
broader, one's a little tighter. So I may,
Absolutely.
can I point one resource gateway to two resource configurations?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
You can do that.
Nice.
You
All
can
right.
have tens of resource configurations shared behind the same resource gateway, and you're absolutely spot on. If you, let's say, you want to create one gateway for your database resources, one gateway for your HTTP resources, then you may want to have sort of different gateways for those two resources.
That makes sense to me. Okay. So I've named this. I'm going to build this out, and please interrupt anytime. We're going to talk through this, but this is the main resource gateway -RG. I'm very clever in my naming. So there you go. Now, IP address type, I have several choices. I could do 4, IPv4, IPv6, or dual stack. 4 is fine for what we're doing. And then I want the VPC. Now, so the VPC I want to pick is the one where obviously my stuff is sitting. I have several VPCs, of Core Impress, some other things I'm doing, but I know that it's the network stack VPC that I want. Now, I built this with a CDK. And by the way, at the end of this talk, I have a CDK stack that will build everything I'm showing, and I'll share that link with y'all. But we built this up with the CDK, threw it out there. Now, the interesting thing here is we want the private zones. So if I click here on the subnets, you can see I have a public and a private. I just want to add the private here. And you can see I here now these in C and D, I don't have anything. So obviously I'm not going to need, that's a good way to know. So I'm going to choose each of these. And one of the things for, obviously for reliability and stuff, you want to kind of spread this across multiple zones, right? So we make sure that it's up and running and communicating. I'm doing 2 for now because that's what my stack has, but yeah. Ashish.
One thing I'll add here is that if you have a situation where you have a database, let's say that is in this example, let's say US West 2C or US West 2D, even if your gateway is in US East 2A and 2B, it doesn't matter. You can still access resources, or rather, you can still share resource configurations that are in 2 different availability zones.
Okay, that's new to me. I didn't know that. That's great.
And
okay,
you won't even get charged for the across easy access. So that's a bonus.
Okay, very cool. All right, so security group. So pick here. So if I go here, I'm going to choose the security group for the ALB again. I actually do both. Which do you recommend here? The one the ALB is using, or the ECS service, or both?
You can use the one that the ALB is using.
Okay, we'll do that. All righty. Okay, that's what I've been doing, but then I was like, well, we get the expert in the room. I'll, throw that in. So, okay, I can add tags if I want. There are some server-side tasks and things that I can do if I want to, but this is it. So that's the gateway. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. All right, so that creates pretty quick. So we'll just throw that out there, and you can see the information. You got the subnets that it's tied to. Here's the actual ID. All right, so that's a gateway. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over and create a resource configuration. All right, so when I'm creating the resource configuration, I can do this a couple of ways, and we'll do this. So this is going to be my ECS resource configuration, because remember, this is kind of tied to what we're doing. If I had RDS, or maybe I get specific, and I don't know, however I want to do that, but this one gets more granular. So I'm going to do a resource, and you see the 2 different. And do you want to talk about the difference between a resource and resource group?
Yeah. So essentially, we added this resource group option where to enable creation of resource configurations, or rather enable sharing of resources, where you have multiple units that are part of one single entity. So what I mean by that is, let's say you have a case where you have multiple EC2 instances that are different nodes of a cluster, right? So you essentially want to share all the nodes as one unit, or rather one entity. So in that case, you would select the resource group option, and then you would, within that group, you would add child resources, one representing each node in that cluster.
Okay.
So in this case, because you're only going to be sharing one, let's say, domain name, you can just go with the singular resource.
That makes sense. And then your type here is so single or child or ARN. So those are the 3 different things you can do. I'm just doing a resource that is an IP address or a DNS address.
Yes.
So, okay.
The child would be relevant only if you were doing a group as the configuration type.
That makes sense. All right. So now, and this is the reason we built the gateway first. We wanted that gateway so we can attach this. And there you go. Now let's get into our resource definition. I know that I'm doing a DNS resource. I could do IP as well, but the DNS is, like I said, ecs.slip.link. Alrighty. It is an IPv4. Again, you have your different choices here. Port ranges, I could narrow down to just what that's accepting. We'll leave that open for the moment. Associate settings allow association with shareable service networks. What's this for?
Yeah, so you remember how I was telling you that we defined the concept of resources and you can access it either via private link or via lattice or a combination of both. So service networks are a concept in VPC lattice. So what you're saying here is that I want this resource configuration, the person who I share this with, I want them to be able to either allow add or not add to a shareable service network. So a service network is also a shareable entity. So if you say allow, what it means is that you create this resource, Eric, you share it with me, I add it to my service network, and then that service network I can share with Michael. So if you want to enable that kind of, sort of transitive sharing, then you would say allow. But if you want to be like, no, Ashish, I'm sharing this resource with you, and it's only you who's going to be able to access it, then you would say not allow.
Okay, but we wouldn't share with Michael because he's shady. But I get what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, look at him. He's got that shady smile. So, all right. Okay, so we go in here. So we'll leave that as allow because we want to share that out. And then the resource shares. So we're going to go ahead and let's see here. Resource share from. Okay, now I've gone blank here. Oh, this is optional. I'm not doing anything with this at the moment. So yeah.
So this is Eric only if you, let's say you like as I said, if you want to share the resource with me, you create a resource share in RAM and select that one here, and then share that resource share with me.
Got it. All right. Everything else I'm going to leave the same. I'll leave monitoring off for the moment. Server-side tasks and status. So I'm going to go ahead and create that, and there we go. It's created and active. So we've done the networking part of this. So now we have a shareable resource that's shareable outside the VPC. So let's take advantage of it. So we're going to go over to Amazon EventBridge, and we're going to build a connection. And so I have one already. We're going to create a new one, and we'll just call this the ECS connection, like so. And this is what's new in EventBridge. This is what Michael's team is working on, is now we can say private. It used to just be a public one, but we're going to go private. And if I hit this drop down, look what's being shared out. Not the gateway, it's the configuration, right? So I could have multiple configurations here, couldn't I? So yeah, so there we go. So we have the ECS RC. So this is a connection to that. So now we have a couple of things we want to set up. So we're going to go, I do need to add my API key. So I have custom configuration, my API key again, please close your eyes while I type this. Key, actually it's gonna, yeah. All right, there we go. All right, it takes everything in me not to actually say it out loud while I type that, but okay, so I don't need anything else, but this is where, if you've never used a connection, this is where you can set up the things that are, look, I'm going to do an OAuth something or other, so I need these headers. And what's really cool is you can select different types of them. You can do a body field, a secret body field, a query string, secret query string, and so on and so forth. And then you can have the key and the value. And notice the value is blanked out, and it's not stored here. Micah, you want to tell them where it's stored?
It's stored in Secrets Manager.
That's right. Move Q up here. Yep. So so we store this in Secrets Manager. So when you edit this, it's creating keys in your Secrets Manager. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create this. I'm not going to save it, apparently. All right, so a couple things we're going to look at here. So one, if we see authorized, that's kind of the starting status. It's saying, look, this is working, but I'm setting this up. It's not going to work quite yet. In fact, we need to wait about 5 minutes, right? And so, and in that, I'm going to jump over and see if we have any questions. But what we're waiting for, and you can see up here, your connection is being created, and it tells you what I just told you. This will take at least 5 minutes. This will actually change from authorized to active. Right. And what's really cool is if you're using like OAuth or something like that, that'll mean that it was able to authorize with the backend server and the connection was made and so on and so forth. You can see everything here. Anything you want to say here before we go back to questions?
Yes, we have a bit of time now that the connection is creating. So let's quickly recap. So we saw that, Eric, you shared the private resource, the ECS basically the load balancer in that regard, right? But you wanted to share your application.
Yep.
Which is behind the load balancer. You created a resource gateway, which is your entry point in the VPC. You then shared the DNS address of that ALB with the resource configuration. That you were at a point where you talked about the resource share, which we skipped, but there was a question in chat about, hey, what about cross-account scenarios? And the customers that I talked to at reInvent when we launched this capability, they were super excited, particularly about the cross-account capabilities, because if you look at this capability from a network perspective, what you would have to do to enable your users and different teams across accounts, you would have to set up firewall rules and routing logic, because potentially they would be in their own VPCs. Now, with resource configurations, because they are resources which can be shared through Resource Access Manager, which is an AWS service which lets you share resources, such as resource configurations, across your organization, you don't have to set up this like network connectivity. You literally share a particular resource with other accounts. So you get the benefits of IAM and like the strong authentication that comes with IAM kind of out of the box for this. There's nothing you have to particularly do in terms of cross-account access, because by default, there's no cross-account access. First of all, it's kind of only available in your same account. That's why you could access it from the connection, right? It's all the same account. And then you have to explicitly give access to a resource if you wanted to share it across accounts. And there's multiple security controls that you can put around that to further restrain access to that resource. And I think that's super powerful, especially at large organizations, enterprise organizations with strong governance and security requirements. Okay.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And we'll actually be showing the cross account here in a little bit as well, because that's one of the things it's nice to have it in the same account, but one of the when you're setting up a large application, generally a rule of thumb, not that I usually do rules of thumbs, but you know what I'm saying, rule of finger is that you kind of isolate your services or your applications in different accounts, right? So you may have one part, like a reporting session. This is the reporting account, that's production. AWS accounts are used as like basically the first layer of defense, right? You have a production account for reporting, and that may have step functions and whatever you need, but you do need to talk across these. You need to send events, you need to call services, things like that. And so we'll do that cross account, and that's where this will get really handy. And I'll actually, like I said, I'll show that. I don't want to drop or change accounts yet, because
yes, that's fair.
Finish this up, but
okay.
And while we have Eric, while we're waiting for this connection to be created, can you go back to the other screen, the VPC screen?
Sure.
So if you look at the private link and lattice tab, you see all of the other good stuff, the endpoints and the endpoint services and the service networks and the lattice services. So if we created a resource gateway and a resource configuration. Now, as Michael was saying, resource configurations are integrated with Resource Access Manager, so I can freely share my resource configurations from one account to the other. And if the other account that I'm sharing my resource configuration with, let's say if they are not using EventBridge or event or step functions, then if they're using like simple networking, then they can use either a resource endpoint, which will be under the endpoints tab, in the endpoints section, or they can use a service network to enable access to that resource configuration. So they have those two options.
So can you kind of talk about when one makes more sense over the other?
Oh yeah. So resource endpoint, if you go to the endpoint section and click on create endpoint, you will see this various options. One of them says resources, right? So that's the resource endpoint. So if you want to, let's say, talk to one particular resource configuration, you would use the resource endpoint. Right now, if you go back from here, and if you have service, and if you go to service networks, then what a service network essentially is that's okay.
No, I was in the wrong place. There it is. I got it. Okay.
Yeah. So essentially, when you go to service networks, what you can do is you can put multiple resource configurations that are shared with you into one service network. And let's say
Okay.
there are 10 different VPCs in your account that need access to those same 10 resources. You would essentially just associate that service network, which has those 10 resource configurations to each VPC. So it's more like as you go from a one-to-one access to a one-to-many access, you would choose, you would go from a resource endpoint to a service network.
Okay,
And
that makes sense.
and
That's
Michael's team,
basically-
because they have, maybe go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, and that I just wanted to add, this is exactly what we are doing on behalf of the customer, is managing these service networks and associations. So if you go to, sorry, Eric, for jumping around, please go back to the resource configuration. If you go back to the resource configuration, you might wonder, okay, what kind of services or associate like things are coming into my resource configuration? Is it being used, right? So if you go to the second tab, Service Network Association in there, yep, you already see one. And this is managed by EventBridge. You can even see it managed by EventBridge. So you see all the associations that are coming in, say from EventBridge or the custom one that Ashish just mentioned with your own resource endpoint from your own VPC. You can actually see them and basically manage them. But this is what we do on behalf in EventBridge for you.
Nice. Very cool. Okay, that makes sense. All right.
So basically, the resource configuration that you created is now part of EventBridge's service network. That's
okay. Okay. All righty. Got it. Anybody following on that? Good. Oh, we're getting still a lot of hellos from Canada, Argentina. All righty. Okay. So the connection is complete. So let's see if Eric got it right. So, which, it's not always the case, but we're going to give it a shot. So, all right. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a step function to actually do this. So we're going to create a new one, and I'll just call it my ECS tester. Okay. So we're going to continue here. All right. So if you've never seen this is the step functions workflow studio. So I'm using JSONata. And I'm going to go ahead and build a quick, and this is going to be really simple. We're not going to do anything crazy in here. There are other shows for that. And if you've not used step functions, check out, there's several links I can give you. It's very cool. But here's what it looks like. What we're actually going to do is the action we want is we're going to call an HTTP API. It's that simple. And in here, we're going to go down and we're going to say, okay, we're going to, call ECS. That's the name of that. The endpoint we want to call is HTTPS ECS.slip.link. Okay. Now the method, I'm going to just do a simple get on it. Now here's where I need to say where I'm calling. Now notice I have an ECS connection available to me. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up. And then I don't need to pass anything. So the request body is not important. In fact, everything else is good. So we're going to go ahead.
Eric, one second, Eric.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a little secret on this one?
Is it gonna blow my mind?
Yeah, just between you and me, right? Secret stays between you and me.
Yeah. So everybody else.
So in the API endpoint section there, the URL that you put in HTTPS and then your domain, often this will exactly match the domain that you shared in the resource configuration, right? It's literally the same ECS.slip.link with the HTTPS prefix because we are talking HTTPS to the target. That's the way we integrate with these targets. However, often we find customers have an ALB, and that ALB might either host multiple DNS names on them, completely different. It could be ECS slip.link and then non-ECS slip.link, for example, or it could be subdomains like my payments API.ECS slip.link and then some other subdomain. Yeah, ECS, exactly. So either different domains, completely different domains, or subdomains. Now, when we implemented this, we thought it would be a bit cumbersome for customers if they would have to share each individual domain name that they want to use as part of their, say, step functions workflow. Now, what is possible that because all these domain names essentially point to the same resource, right? You can share the resource once, say through ECS slip.link. That's exactly what you did. But in the API endpoint here in this field or in EventBridge in the destination, you can pick the actual URL that you want to target as long as it points to the same, in this case, ALB. Like you could use your ALB, the auto-generated ALB domain name, for example here, or any other domain that also points to this ALB. And that allows for like flexible routing. Often you have virtual host-based routing on the ALB and so on. So you don't have to share all these domain names, even though they point to the same ALB multiple times. Of course you could, but you don't have to.
But the important thing to understand is it has to be HTTPS. So if you do HTTP, so you need a cert on whatever domain you're running, right?
Yep. It has to be a trusted, valid
Yep.
certificate. And we enforce HTTPS. This is just a security best practice and measure.
Yep.
Obviously, if you have an HTTP resource, then you can do HTTPS termination, TLS termination on the ALB. So we still talk HTTPS to the ALB, and then behind the ALB, you go to an HTTP target. So that is typically what we see customers doing. If they don't have say they have an EC2 host, which just talks HTTP, it's an old appliance running on there. You put an ALB in front of it, which does the termination, and then you move on.
Sounds good. Okay, for time, I'm going to go ahead and move us along because I want to make sure and show the cross org, or I will have broken my promise. But so what I've done is I'm creating the step functions. It's actually looked at what I'm doing. It's created an IAM role for this, specifically calling the EventBridge connection, calling Sequence Manager to get the data needed. So here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. Now we want to go ahead and execute it. I could have done it in test state, but I'm doing it here. So all right, yeah, we've got a couple questions coming in. All right, so let's execute this and see if it actually works. And there it's calling it. And it, first time it worked. If you look down here, hang on a sec, in the input output, there you go. Hello from backend, just like we had before on our thing. So that actually works. All right, so cross org. So we have two. I'm going to let you all answer some questions real quick. First one is, my EKS cluster requires MTLS authentication. Is it somehow supported? And that's at the connection. Michael, you want to grab that one?
Yeah, we currently, unfortunately, we don't support MTLS, like both client and server-side validation in step functions and EventBridge. So MTLS is what we track. So Dorda, I think I butchered your name, sorry for that. But please do reach out to your AWS account team or support team, and we'll get you tracked on the feature, because we do internally track these requests. The other question is from Julian. He's basically reiterating what I was saying. So as long as the DNS or the endpoint, the HTTP endpoint address that you put in, points to the same resource via IP, DNS, etc., even if that was not shared, say you had eks.slip.link also pointing to the ALB, but you only shared ecs.slip.link, would that work? Yes, it would work, but required that there's also a valid certificate presented, which has these SNIs listed. So the certificate needs ECS and eks.slip.link in the certificate chain, basically, as accepted SNIs.
Would a star work?
On the certificate?
Yeah.
Yes, works, but this only works for subdomains, right?
Okay.
So if you have a completely arbitrary different domain, you would need to also call it out. But wildcards on
star.slip.link would get me EKS and ECS.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. So cross org. Here's where we're headed. I'm over in the Resource Access Manager, right? There's or RAM for short. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create. If you're watching, I clicked. In fact, I'll start over just so you can see it. So I'm going to create a resource share. You can see I've had some others that I was working on. So I'm going to call this. We'll call this ECS RAM. I'm going to move a little quick. But the resource I want, what I'm sharing is I'm sharing a resource configuration, because that's what I created, right? So
the last option.
There it is. Yeah. Okay. VPC lattice. Did they change that? Did that used to just say resource configuration? So anyway, okay. So then I'm going to check here, and you can see the resource ID I've got. So this is the full ARN. Here's the ID that I want. Now I'm going to go next. I can add tags and such. But you can see these are the listed resources, resource configurations. Now I could create custom managed permissions. I don't need to right now. I'm going to use the current one. That's fine. So we'll go next here. Now the account that I want to share. Oh, and I don't have it handy. Hang on a second. So I have an AWS account. Oh, this is ridiculous. Hang on a sec, folks. This is the one thing I should have had. I should have it here. Give me a second. No. Nope. All right, so we're gonna have to do this. Watch this. I'm gonna go in here. I'm gonna get logged out because I don't have mine set up for multi-session, but that's all right. So this is the account I want. All right. So okay, my bad. So we'll just here. We'll do this. This is the fun part of how we do this sometimes. I'll just go back over here. Go back to my demo account. And we're going to have to create that again, but that's no big deal. RAM. Okay. All right. Someone report that to my boss. I blew it there, didn't I? All right. So we're going to call this ECS RAM or ECS share. We're doing the resource configuration right there. VPC lattice here. Grab this one. We're going next. Okay, we like this. So then the account we want is this one here. So we're going to add that. So you can see I have a principal ID. Now notice, doesn't have to be an account, it can be an organization. That was the question we had. Organization unit, an IAM role, a user, or a service principal. So you have all kinds of options here. I just happen to be using account for this one. So I'm going to go next. Resources to share. This is basically the review. So I've showed the resources that I'm doing, who I'm sharing it with, and we'll go ahead and create that share. Now we're only halfway done. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go here. We're going to close these other tabs so I don't do the wrong one, because I will. And we'll go back here and we're going to go into this new account. Oh, it says the changes may not be saved. We'll see if I may have gone too fast. We'll see. All right. So I have one invitation. So I'm in the RAM on the new account. I have one invitation. And here it is, ECS RAM. That's the one we just made. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it and say, accept the resource share. Okay. So now I've connected these. So let's go to EventBridge again.
Side note, if you are in an organization, you don't have to accept. So the acceptance is only if there's no org set up. If you're worried like, oh, all my 1,000 users have to accept. No, not in an org.
There you go. Okay. Yeah. Good call. All right, so we're going to go into the connections again, and you see that I built this before. We'll create a new one just so you can see it. So I'm going to go ahead and say a private. We'll call this cross 2, so I'm not mistaken. So I want a private one, and there it is, ECSRC, just like before, custom configuration, API gateway, x-API-key. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and create this, not store the password. And now I'm same thing as before. Timing is not going to let us get to actually show it to you here, but you can see the connection works. And so now it's just as if they're in the same account. Step functions would see this connection, and you'd be able to call cross account, and that's how that works. All right. Any questions coming in? I don't see any at the moment. Okay, we've got them, and we have to end on time because there's other people coming behind us. We've got a few moments. Any last minute questions, or Michael or Ashish, do y'all want to throw something out? Well, Ashish, we'll start with you, and Michael will let you kind of wrap it.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, like as you saw, we created a resource, and then you were able to access that resource using EventBridge. We are hoping that this pattern that we've unlocked of AWS services accessing private resources via this new capability called cross VPC resource access, we are hoping that this will become more standardized, and we will have other AWS services like EventBridge that also need access to customers' private resources using cross VPC resource access. So yeah, we are in touch with other teams as well. Of course, we can't talk about them right now, but we're hoping to make this like a more standard pattern for AWS services, and also for ISVs, independent software vendors that need access to customer resources. So
all right. All right. And I'm gonna, sorry, Michael, we have like maybe 30 seconds. Anything you want to throw out?
No, that's fine. There was one question, and I think you sent a link there to that person who connected late. It's easier. So whatever you missed, look at Eric's link and video. It's fully explained there.
So the link I just hit was actually the GitHub repo where you can deploy this whole thing to look at it. With that, I'll be tweeting out a link to the actual video. So watch for my tweet on EDJ Geek, also on Blue Sky, EDJ Geek, or on LinkedIn, single digit Eric Johnson, single digit. With that, we have to sign off because we are there. Thanks to our producer, Paco, and Ashish. Michael, thanks for joining me. We're out.
Thank you so much.
Next week, same time, same place.